Today we're going to talk about another process that we can use to solve quadratic equations called completing the square. When we complete the square, our goal is to get perfect square trinomials on one side of the equation so that we can factor them nicely. So let's go ahead and talk about for perfect square trinomials and what's so special about them. If you notice, we have a trinomial here. So if we go to factor the trinomial, we're going to have a 9 on top of the x and a 6 on the bottom. So we need two numbers that multiply to give us 9 and add up to 6. So those two numbers would be 3 and 3. I can go right to my parentheses from here. So I would have x plus 3 in my first group and x plus 3 in my second group. If I have x plus 3 twice, that means I could rewrite this as x plus 3 squared. Okay, let's do the second one. In the top of my x, I would have a 25. In the bottom, I would have a negative 10. So the two numbers that multiply to give me 25 and add up to negative 10 would be negative 5 and negative 5. So in my parentheses, I would have x minus 5 times x minus 5. So again, if I have the same thing twice, I can rewrite this as x minus 5 squared. So hopefully this pattern holds true for the last one. 49 goes on top of my x, 14 goes on the bottom, so the two numbers that multiply to give me 49 and add up to 14 are 7 and 7. So I have x plus 7 times x plus 7. So again, we can rewrite that as x plus 7 squared. These are all perfect square trinomials because when we factor them, we can rewrite them as a group being squared. So when we complete the square, our goal is to find a number that works on our expression or equation so that when we factor, it does work out like that. So what we're going to do is, to complete the square, we're going to take half of b and square it, and that's the formula you need to memorize. So b over 2 and square it. So notice in example 1 that in this trinomial, our a is 1, our b is 6, and then we have our c. We're trying to figure out what our c should be to make it so that it factors nicely. So using that formula, we will have 6 divided by 2, and then we'll square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. Notice I put that 3 in parentheses. It helps you prevent sign errors. 3 squared gives you 9. So my perfect square trinomial would be x squared plus 6x plus 9. Now, I'm looking for the two numbers that multiply to give me 9 and add up to give me 6, which would be 3 and 3. So that means I have, since they're the same, x plus 3 squared. Let's do another one. In the second one, we have ax squared, or 1x squared, which is our a, minus 8x, which gives us our b, and then we're trying to find our c. So we're going to take half of our b, so we're going to do negative 8 divided by 2, and then square that answer. So negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4, and negative 4 squared gives me positive 16. So my perfect square trinomial is x squared minus 8x plus 16. So when I factor this, 16 goes on top. Sorry about that, kind of sloppy. And negative 8 goes on bottom. So the two numbers that multiply to give me 16 and add up to negative 8 are negative 4 and negative 4. So I have x minus 4 squared. Okay, there is something I want you to notice here. When we went through this process, as long as you do it correctly and pay attention to this, the number that we ended up with in our parentheses, the plus 3, and the minus 4, are actually the same as the number we got in the middle of our formula here. So when we simplified, those numbers always end up being the same. So that is a shortcut so that you don't have to go through and show your x for factoring. So we are not going to actually stop here. We're going to use this to help us solve equations. Okay, so to solve by completing the square, we're going to start by moving the constant term to the right side of the equation and everything else on the left. So that means we'll have an x squared and an x on the left side, and we'll have a number on the right side. We're going to complete the square and add that number to both sides of the equation. We're going to factor the perfect square trinomial on the left side and simplify the right side. And then we're going to solve the equation by taking the square root of both sides, remember the plus and minus sign, and isolating the variable. Okay, so we have those steps up here. We're going to follow those for this first problem. Okay, so we have x squared plus 20x plus 19. First step is to take this constant term, the 19, and move it to the other side. Let's change back to a pen. Okay, so we're going to move this part over to the other side. So I'm going to do minus 19 on both sides. Okay, for the second step, before I do anything, I like to put this with a blank on each side. Because I'm going to complete the square and find a number to put in that blank, and it's going to be the same on both sides. So it helps me remember the right side, because a lot of times students forget that. Okay, so what we're going to do is take our b and divide it by 2. So 20 divided by 2, and then square it. So 20 divided by 2 is 10, and 10 squared gives us 100. So that's going to be our step 2. That means we're going to put 100 on both sides of the equation. Okay, so this is kind of where we were. If you look at this left side here, this is what we were doing in the last example. From here, we are going to factor. The left side will always factor when we do this into this form. We just need to figure out what the number is there. So the easiest way to do that is when we took 20 and divided by 2, we got 10. And because it was a positive 20, we have a positive 10 in the middle. It's factored. I don't have to think about it any more than that. We're done. The right side is negative 19 plus 100, which gives us 81. Okay, so that's our step 3. And then step 4 is to solve. So to solve here, we need to take the square root of both sides. So that leaves me with x plus 10 on the left. And then the square root of 81 is 9. Common mistake here is that students forget about that plus or minus sign. And then we're going to solve. So we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. Okay, please make sure you are really careful with this. This is telling us to do 2 things. Because of that plus or minus sign, it's telling us that x is going to equal positive 9 minus 10, and it's going to equal negative 9 minus 10. So that's actually how we're going to find our 2 answers. Common mistake that I see is students will change the sign in front of the 10 instead of the sign in front of the 9. So 9 minus 10 is negative 1. Negative 9 minus 10 is negative 19. So my 2 answers are negative 1 and negative 19. Okay, so that's what you're doing here for the process to solve. Completing the square. Let's do another one. Okay, we are going to start by moving this constant term to the right side. So we're going to add 73 to both sides. And we are going to rewrite this. We have x squared plus 20x plus something equals, and then 0 plus 73 is 73 plus that same thing. Not sure what it is yet. We're going to figure that out. Okay, so to figure that out, we're going to take 20 and divide by 2 and then square it. So 20 divided by 2 is 10. 10 squared is 100. So if we simplify from there, or factor from there, always in the form x within parentheses squared, and then the number that we're going to use is the number we got when we divided by 2. So 20 divided by 2 is a positive 10, so that's what's going to go in our parentheses. And then on the right side, 73 plus 100 is 173. Continue to solve by using square roots. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. And since we can't break down the square root of 173, we're actually going to leave it. Like that. And then we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. Okay, so this one's a little different. We're going to leave this as an exact answer. We have negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 173. So this is what we call an exact answer. If you could, you would simplify the square root, but 173 does not break down nicely. So we're going to stop with that. Okay, and this is our final answer. Okay, there are 2 more problems for you to try. If you have any questions, feel free to ask at any time. Once you finish, get your homework and practice that, and then try your quiz. Have a great day.